I woke up on my son's wedding day with a shaven head, a cruel gift from my daughter-in-law. But what she did that night was more than cutting hair. It was an attempt to erase me, to turn me into something invisible and powerless. She thought she was humiliating an old man, but instead she unknowingly set my true self free. They tried to strip away my dignity, my home, my future, never realizing I was guarding a $1, 5 million secret. What they didn't understand is that when you push a man with nothing left to lose, you don't break him, you make him invincible. And the price of that mistake is everything they have. This story of betrayal all began within the four walls of my home, a sanctuary they tried to turn into a prison. Before I take you back to that quiet house in Ohio where it all started, I'd be honored to know where this story is finding you. Please let me know in the comments which city or country you're listening from today. The cruelty didn't begin on the morning of the wedding itself. It began 3 days before in a place I had always considered safe, my own home. My story, the end of my old life, started in my garden. It was my sanctuary, a small kingdom of order and color I'd cultivated for 30 years. Every brick in the path, every climbing rose on the trellis was a memory of my late wife, Helen, and a testament to the life we'd built in this quiet Ohio suburb. This house wasn't just wood and nails. It was the blueprint of my entire life, the place I'd raised Leo. At 67, a retired architect, I found comfort in structure, in things that lasted. I believed my family was one of those things. That afternoon, Leo and his fiancée Claire arrived. My son had my late wife's kind eyes, but none of her spine. Claire, a chic public relations specialist, moved through my home with an air of polite assessment, as if cataloging items for a future estate sale. "Dad," Leo began, his voice laced with the rehearsed seriousness Claire had likely coached him on, "we wanted to talk to you about the future." Claire presented their plan with the slick confidence of a corporate takeover. They called it the Abbott Legacy Fund. The concept was brutally simple. I would sell my home, liquidate my retirement savings, and turn everything over to them. In return, they would manage the fund and provide me with a monthly stipend, an allowance, in my own life. It's about securing our family's future. "Dad," Leo said, avoiding my gaze. I looked at the earnest, weak-willed face of the boy I'd taught to ride a bike and felt a cold fury I hadn't experienced in years. This wasn't concern. It was a hostile bid for my independence. "This house," I said, my voice dangerously calm, "is not a burden. It is my home. My savings are the product of 40 years of work. They are not yours to manage." The air crackled with tension. "The answer is no. This discussion is over. I think you should both leave." Leo looked crushed, but Claire's eyes hardened into tiny chips of ice. As I held the door open for them, she turned to me, her voice a venomous whisper. "You can cling to your sad little memories all you want, Graham, but you'll see. Without us, you're just a lonely old man." The next day, they returned together. Claire's face was a mask of contrition. Leo hovered behind her, his shoulders slumped in apology. She carried a small, expensive-looking box of herbal tea. "Graham, we are so sorry," Claire began, her voice trembling artfully as she nudged Leo forward. "I was completely out of line. I'm just so stressed with the wedding." Against my better judgment, I let them in. I wanted to believe my son felt remorse. Claire insisted on brewing me a cup of the special calming tea herself. "To help you relax before the big day," she cooed, handing me the steaming mug. As she did, I looked past her to my son. Leo stood by the kitchen counter, unable to meet my eyes, his silence a heavy, damning presence in the room. I drank the tea, hoping it was an olive branch. It tasted faintly of chamomile and something bitter I couldn't place. They left soon after. Exhausted from the emotional turmoil, I went to bed early, feeling a profound, heavy drowsiness I attributed to the tea. I woke the next morning, Leo's wedding day, to a strange, unnatural coldness on my scalp. The air in my bedroom felt heavy, and my mind was thick with a fog that refused to lift. My hand rose slowly to my head. Instead of the familiar thickness of my silver hair, my fingers met the rough, horrifying texture of bare skin and sharp stubble. A wave of nausea churned in my stomach. I stumbled out of bed and into the bathroom, my heart hammering against my ribs. I flipped on the light, dreading what I would see. The reflection that stared back was a stranger, a violated, hollow-eyed old man. My hair, my dignity, was gone, hacked away in jagged patches, leaving a pale, naked scalp. And in that silent, sterile bathroom, under the harsh, fluorescent glare, I knew. It wasn't just Claire's venom. It was Leo's silence. It was both of them. My hand was shaking as I picked up the phone. For a moment I considered calling the police. But what would I say that my son's fiancée had drugged me and shaved my head? The accusation sounded insane even to me. No, this was a family matter. A wound that needed to be addressed before it festered. I dialed Leo's number. Dad, it's 6 in the morning. Is everything okay? His voice was groggy, but I could hear an undercurrent of anxiety. He knew. I need you to come over, Leo. Right now. My voice was gravelly unfamiliar. What's wrong, your fiancée? She did something. Just come. I hung up before I could say more. An hour later they arrived together, just as I knew they would. Claire swept into my kitchen, first her face a perfect portrait of concern. Leo followed a shadow of a man, his eyes darting everywhere but at me. Graham, oh my goodness. What happened? Claire rushed to my side, her hands fluttering near my head, as if to touch the damage, but not quite daring to. The performance was immaculate. She widened her eyes, her lower lip trembling slightly. Your beautiful hair. It's all gone. Did you fall? Did something happen? I sidestepped her feigned sympathy and looked directly at my son. Leo, he flinched. Dad, what's going on? You know exactly what's going on, I said, my voice low and steady. Last night your fiancée served me drugged tea, and after I passed out, she came into my room and shaved my head. Claire gasped, pressing a hand to her chest, in theatrical shock. Graham, that's a monstrous thing to say. How could you even think that Leo tell him? Tell him where I was. She turned to Leo, her eyes locking onto his, not as a request, but as a command. My son, my only child, looked from her demanding face to my devastated one. I saw the conflict warring within him, the flicker of truth, the shame quickly extinguished by a lifetime of fearing confrontation. Dad, that's crazy. He stammered the words, sounding hollow in my own kitchen. Claire was with me all night, at the hotel. You know that. We had the rehearsal dinner. She could have come here after you fell asleep. I countered my last shred of hope fraying. Why would I do that? Claire's voice rose to the pitch of wounded innocence. Because you want to prove I'm unstable. Because you couldn't bully me into giving you my house, so now you're trying to destroy my reputation. On my wedding day, she was brilliant, twisting her own malicious act into a narrative of my supposed senility and greed. I ignored her, my focus entirely on my son. This was the moment, the pivot upon which our entire history would turn. Leo, I said, my voice barely a whisper, look at me, look at my head, and look me in the eye, and tell me as my son that you believe her. For a terrible stretched-out second he met my gaze. I saw it all there, the guilt of a child caught in a lie, the knowledge of his complicity, the silent apology he was too cowardly to voice. But it was fleeting. His eyes broke away, skittering back to Claire as if to a magnetic north. He chose. Dad, I think you're overwrought, he said, the clinical, detached words feeling like stones thrown at my chest. You've been under a lot of stress. Maybe you did this to yourself and don't remember. Sometimes when people get older... He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. He didn't have to. The betrayal was complete. It wasn't just the act of shaving my head. It was this. This deliberate, cruel denial. This choice to sacrifice his own father to appease the woman who held his leash. My son didn't just let her hold the scissors. He stood by and held the light. The fight went out of me, replaced by an unnerving, icy calm. The son I had raised, the boy whose nightmares I had chased away, was gone. In his place stood a stranger, a man who looked at my pain and saw only an inconvenience. The silence that filled the room wasn't empty. It was the sound of a 35-year-old bond breaking irrevocably. The wig was a final petty humiliation. It was cheap synthetic hair, an itchy crown of auburn that looked nothing like my own. But it was better than the alternative, facing a crowd of familiar faces with the raw evidence of my son's betrayal exposed for all to see. As I walked into the church, I felt like a stranger at my own son's wedding. I was no longer the proud father of the groom. I was an inconvenient truth hastily covered up. My seat was not in the front row beside the bride's parents. Instead, I found my name card at a table in the back, tucked away near the kitchens, alongside distant cousins and old neighbors. We thought you'd be more comfortable here away from the hustle and bustle, Claire had texted me that morning. It wasn't a kindness. It was a quarantine. I watched the ceremony from afar. I saw Leo's face light up as Claire walked down the aisle, and he looked at her with an adoration that used to be reserved for me. After his mother passed, it had been the two of us against the world. I worked 3 jobs to keep us afloat, to build a future for him brick by brick. In his wedding speech, Leo spoke eloquently about family. He thanked Claire's parents, Eleanor and Thomas Jensen, for welcoming him with open arms for their wisdom and generosity. He praised their perfect family, their beautiful home, their impeccable taste. He spoke for 10 minutes. And in those 10 minutes, the man who had raised him, the father who had sacrificed everything, was never mentioned. I was not just seated in the back. I had been completely erased from the narrative of his life. The applause felt like static in my ears. The pain I'd felt that morning in my kitchen had been sharp and hot. This was different. It was a cold, creeping numbness. I was a ghost at this feast. The true breaking point, the moment the numbness finally shattered, came during the reception. I was standing near the gift table, trying to remain invisible, when I heard Claire's tinkling laughter. She was holding court with a small group of guests, including her mother, Eleanor. "Oh, you should have heard him this morning," Claire was saying, her voice dripping with the false sympathy she had perfected. "Poor Graham was convinced I'd snuck into his house and cut off all his hair. He's becoming so paranoid." A ripple of shocked murmurs went through the group. Eleanor shook her head sadly. "Age can be so cruel. Some people just don't handle it gracefully." "Exactly," Claire continued, leaning in conspiratorially. "We've been trying to be patient, but honestly, it's becoming a real burden on Leo. That's why we tried to talk to him about the legacy fund to help manage his affairs. He just got so agitated." She paused for dramatic effect. "We're actually discussing the next steps. It might be time to look into a professional care facility, somewhere he can get the help he truly needs." A care facility. The words hung in the air, connecting everything. The fight over the fund, the attack in my sleep, this public character assassination. It wasn't random cruelty. It was a calculated plan to prove me incompetent, to seize control of my assets by declaring me mentally unfit. This was step 2. The anger, when it finally came, was not a fiery explosion. It was a silent, clarifying wave of ice. It washed away the hurt, the grief, and the 35 years of selfless love I had poured into a son who now stood 20 feet away, laughing with his groomsmen oblivious. He wasn't just complicit. He was the prize she would win once I was locked away. I set my untouched glass of champagne down on a nearby table. I straightened my tie, adjusted the horrible itchy wig one last time, and turned. Without a word to anyone, I walked out of the reception hall, past the smiling bride and groom, and into the cool night air. The party continued behind me, the music swelling, not a single person noticing my departure. They had already erased me. But as I walked toward my car, I wasn't an old man retreating in defeat. I was an architect, and I was about to draw up a new blueprint for my life. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my favorite armchair, the one Helen and I bought on our 10th anniversary, and watched the dawn creep into my living room. There were no tears. The time for grief was over. Now was the time for blueprints. The first thing I did when the sun was fully up on Sunday morning was call a 24-hour locksmith. "I need every lock on my property changed immediately," I said. 2 hours later, the friendly serviceman handed me a new set of keys. The old ones, including the one Leo had carried since he was 16, were now useless pieces of metal. It was a small practical act, but it felt monumental. I was securing my perimeter. On Monday morning, I was in the office of Robert Hartwell, my late sister Charlotte's attorney. Robert was a sharp, no-nonsense man in his 50s who had managed Charlotte's considerable estate. He looked at me over his glasses, his expression professionally neutral, but his eyes full of concern. "Graham, you look like you've been through a war," he said gently. "You could say that, Robert." I replied, my voice even. "I need to make some immediate and drastic changes to my will." I laid out my request with the precision of an architect detailing building specifications. My current will left everything to Leo. The new one would be different. I wanted to remove my son as the beneficiary, completely. Robert's eyebrows shot up, but he simply made a note. "May I ask who the new beneficiary will be?" This was the part I had thought about all night, the part that gave my pain a purpose. My sister worked her entire life as a successful accountant, I began. She believed in the power of education and hard work. I want to honor that. I want to use my entire estate, including the inheritance she left me, to establish the Charlotte Abbott Scholarship Fund. I specified its purpose to provide full scholarships for architectural students from low-income families. Robert listened intently, a slow smile spreading across his face. That Graham is a magnificent legacy. He assured me the documents would be drawn up by the end of the day. My next request was more urgent. I also need to sell my house, and it needs to be done quickly, quietly, and off-market. I don't want a for sale sign on my lawn. I don't want my son or his new wife to know about it until it's a done deal. This was where having a lawyer like Robert was crucial. He had a network. Cash buyers, private investors, he mused, tapping his pen. It means you might not get the absolute top dollar, but you'll get speed and discretion. I can make some calls. By the time I left his office, the wheels were in motion. For the next 2 weeks, I moved with a quiet, methodical purpose. I was designing my own escape. I went through 35 years of memories, sorting them into 3 categories: keep, donate, and discard. The furniture went to a charity that helped families starting over. The old clothes, the unused kitchen gadgets, all of it was given away. I was shedding the weight of my old life. The things I kept were few but precious. Helen's china, Charlotte's favorite books, and the photo albums. I couldn't bring myself to throw away the pictures of Leo's childhood. The smiling boy on his first day of school. The teenager proudly holding his driver's license. I packed them carefully into a box, sealed it with tape, and labeled it Memories. I would put it in a small, anonymous storage unit across town. Perhaps one day he would want them. Perhaps not. But they were no longer mine to carry. I didn't answer my phone when Leo called, which he did with increasing frequency. The messages started as confused. Hey, Dad, just checking in, then moved to annoyed Dad. Call me back. Claire is worried. And finally to demanding, Dad, what is going on? Pick up the phone. I listened to them once dispassionately and then deleted them. His voice was just noise from a building that was no longer part of my design. I was busy drawing up a new one. It was 3 weeks to the day after the wedding. I was taping up the last box of books when the doorbell rang sharp and insistent. I knew who it was. Through the peephole I saw Leo and Claire on my doorstep, their faces etched with impatience. I watched as Leo tried his old key in the lock, his confusion turning to frustration when it wouldn't turn. The new lock held firm. I opened the door and stood before them, not saying a word. They pushed past me into the foyer, stopping dead in their tracks. The living room, once filled with a lifetime of furniture and memories, was now a cavernous, echoing space, punctuated only by neatly stacked boxes. What is this? Leo breathed, his eyes wide with disbelief. Claire recovered first her shock, quickly morphing into fury. What is this? This is emotional blackmail, that's what this is. You can't handle that. Your son has his own family now, so you throw a childish tantrum selling off everything to punish us. Punish you, I asked, my voice calm. It seemed to unnerve them more than shouting would have. This has nothing to do with punishment. This is about cause and effect. This is a consequence. A consequence for what she spat. For caring about you. For worrying that you're losing your mind. Losing my mind, I repeated, nodding slowly. Yes, that was the plan, wasn't it? To prove I was senile so you could get your hands on my assets. I walked over to a small box on the kitchen counter, the only one I had left unsealed for this very moment. I reached inside and pulled out a small, empty cardboard box, decorated with elegant floral patterns. The logo for Serenity Night Herbal Infusion was printed on the front. I placed it on the counter between us. I found this in the trash the morning of the wedding, Claire. It was tucked underneath some coffee grounds. You were careless. Her perfectly made-up face went pale. For the first time since I'd met her, her mask of composure cracked. I have no idea what that is. Don't you? I continued, my gaze unwavering. It's a very effective sleep aid. So effective, in fact, that a man can sleep through his hair being shaved off by a pair of scissors. You didn't just attack me, Claire. You premeditated it. You drugged me. She stared at the box, speechless, her mind racing for an escape route that didn't exist. The evidence, small but irrefutable, sat between us. Leo looked from the box to his wife, then to me, his face a mess of confusion and dawning horror. Claire, what is he talking about? But I wasn't finished. I turned my full attention to my son. She didn't do it alone, though. She needed an accomplice, someone to stand by silently while she poured the tea, someone whose betrayal would hurt more than any pair of scissors. I took a step closer to him, my voice dropping to a low, intense whisper that cut through the silence. And I know you were there, Leo. I saw your face right before I drank it. You stood there and you watched. That was the blow that shattered everything. Leo physically recoiled, his face crumpling as if I had struck him. All the fight drained out of Claire, replaced by a raw, venomous rage. "Fine!" she shrieked, her voice shrill and ugly. "Yes, I did it, and you deserved it. You're a controlling, miserable old man who was trying to ruin our lives." "No," I said, my voice cutting through her tirade with surgical precision. "You see me as an obstacle, a line item on a budget. And you, Leo, you see me as a problem you'd rather ignore than solve." I walked to the front door and held it open. My new life doesn't have room for either of those things. Now get out of my house. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Claire, vibrating with impotent fury, grabbed Leo's arm and yanked him toward the door. He stumbled after her, his eyes still locked on mine, filled with a silent, pathetic plea. I gave him nothing. I closed the door on their retreating backs, the solid thud of the new lock clicking into place. And in the echoing silence of my empty house, I felt the last 35 years of my life finally come to a close. 6 months can feel like a lifetime, or in my case, the beginning of one. I stood on a trail overlooking Portland, Oregon, the crisp autumn air filling my lungs. The city glittered below, a testament to human ingenuity and design that as an architect I deeply appreciated. My hair had grown back, a soft uniform silver that caught the morning light. I wore it shorter now, a style of my own choosing. Everything in my life was of my own choosing now. My cousin Rebecca, who had welcomed me with open arms, had been a godsend, but she quickly realized I wasn't looking for a caretaker. I was looking for a life. I found it in the rhythm of this new city. I'd joined a hiking club filled with retired professionals who talked about geology and literature, not gossip. I volunteered twice a week at the Architectural Heritage Center, sharing my knowledge with students. I had friends. Real friends who liked me for my quiet humor and my stories about building design, not for what they thought they could get from me. I had peace. That afternoon, a small stack of forwarded mail was waiting for me at my new modern apartment. Most of it was junk, but one envelope stood out. The handwriting was painfully familiar. It was from Leo. For a long moment, I considered throwing it away unopened, but curiosity and perhaps the last lingering ghost of a father's love won out. I made a cup of coffee and sat down to read it. "Dear Dad," it began, "I don't know if you'll ever read this. I don't deserve for you to. I'm writing because I have no one else to talk to and because you deserve to know the truth. My marriage to Claire is over." I paused, taking a slow sip of coffee. I felt no triumph, only a quiet, somber sense of inevitability. After you left, everything changed. Without you to focus on as her project, her obstacle, all of Claire's poison turned on me. The constant criticism, the control, the little lies. It was suffocating. I started to see what you must have seen all along. The final straw came last week. I was looking for a document on her laptop, and I found an email. It was an email she sent to her mother the day after the wedding. She was bragging, "Dad," she wrote, "the old man is gone. Phase 1 complete. Leo is so wrapped around my finger he didn't even flinch. Now we just wait for him to be declared incompetent, and the house is ours. She called you a doting old fool and said your love for me was her greatest weapon." The words were vile, but they were a confirmation, not a revelation. I had known the what, but not the how. Not the cold, calculated language of her conquest. Reading that broke something inside me. I realized I hadn't just been a coward. I had been a fool. I had traded the purest love I'd ever known for a cheap imitation, a business transaction disguised as a marriage. I confronted her. She didn't even deny it. She just said I was too weak to see the big picture. I told her to get out. She's gone. I sit here in this empty, expensive apartment we rented, and all I can think about is our little house. Your garden. The smell of your coffee in the morning. I lost it all, Dad. I know I lost you. I am so sorry. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even know what I'm asking for. I just needed you to know that I see it now. I see everything. I finished the letter and stared out the large window of my apartment. The sun was setting over the distant hills, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. A new blueprint was being drawn across the horizon. My son was living in the rubble of the life he had chosen, and I was living in the home I had built for myself. There was no joy in his pain, but there was a profound, quiet rightness in my peace. I folded Leo's letter and set it on my desk beside a photograph of a smiling young Helen. What would she have done? Her capacity for forgiveness had always been greater than mine, but Helen had never mistaken forgiveness for a lack of boundaries. Forgiveness, she used to say, was for yourself. Trust had to be earned. I sat down at my desk intending to write my reply when an email notification popped up on my laptop screen. The subject line read, Q1 Report, the Charlotte Abbott Scholarship Fund. It was from Robert Hartwell. I opened it. The report detailed the fund's performance and listed the names of the first 3 recipients. Bright, talented students from underprivileged backgrounds who would now be able to pursue their architectural dreams without the crushing weight of debt. One of them had included a short, heartfelt note of thanks. A quiet warmth spread through my chest. This was Charlotte's legacy. This was my legacy now. It was a foundation built not on blood, but on merit and kindness. It was solid. It was real. And it was everything Leo and Claire had tried to take, only to lose it forever, without even knowing it existed. I knew then what I needed to say to my son. I picked up my pen. Dear Leo, thank you for your letter. It takes a certain kind of courage to face the wreckage of your own choices, and for that I acknowledge you. The pain you're feeling now is the harsh, necessary architect of wisdom. I hope you learn from it. I need you to understand something. I didn't leave because I stopped loving you. I left because in order to continue loving you, I would have had to stop loving myself. For 35 years you were the sun my world orbited around. It was a joy and a privilege to be your father, but a world with only one sun eventually becomes a desert. I was becoming a desert Leo, parched, empty, and erased. That is not your fault. It is mine. I forgot to draw boundaries. I forgot that a father's love should be a foundation, not a cage, that keeps him from his own life. The events of your wedding didn't break me. They woke me up. I paused looking out at the vibrant green of the Portland landscape. The life I have here is my own. I have friends who share my passions, mornings spent hiking in the clean mountain air, and evenings filled with conversation and laughter. I am not lonely. For the first time in a very long time, I am content. I will not give this up. I do not hate you, son, but the man you betrayed is no longer here. I have rebuilt myself on a new foundation with new blueprints. If we are to have a relationship in the future, it must be on these new terms. It must be between 2 men equals who respect each other's lives and choices. It cannot be the relationship of a sacrificial father and a dependent son. That path is a long one, and it is yours to walk alone. Perhaps one day it will lead you back in my direction, perhaps not. I wish you peace on your journey. Dad. I sealed the letter and placed it in the outgoing mail slot in my building's lobby. There was no bitterness, no anger, only a clean, quiet closure. I walked back upstairs not to dwell on the past, but to prepare for the present. My hiking boots were by the door, and my friend David was picking me up in 20 minutes to explore a new trail on Mount Hood. My phone buzzed. It was a text from the hiking group, chat a picture of the sun breaking through the clouds over a majestic peak. The caption read, Clear skies ahead. I smiled, grabbing my light jacket. Outside, the city of Portland gleamed full of promise. I stepped out into the bright, welcoming sunlight, a free man walking into a life of his own design. Graham Abbott's story is a profound exploration of what happens when a lifetime of love is met with calculated cruelty. It transcends a simple narrative of conflict. It's a painful look at the slow, quiet process of erasure where a person is made to feel devalued and invisible in their own family. So many betrayal stories focus on a single dramatic act of malice, but Graham's experience was a systematic attempt to dismantle his identity and autonomy, piece by painful piece. His journey from a devoted father to a man forced to reclaim his very existence is a powerful testament to the unbreakable nature of the human spirit when pushed to its absolute limit. The central lesson here is a subtle yet powerful one, particularly for parents and grandparents who have given their all. There is a crucial difference between loving sacrifice and self-annihilation. What elevates this among other grandpa stories is its honest portrayal of that fine line. For decades, Graham's love was a wellspring of support for his son, but he learned the hard way that when that love is not reciprocated with basic respect, it can become a tool for his own destruction. It suggests that sometimes God allows our carefully constructed worlds to be shattered, not to punish us, but to force us to see the cracks in a foundation we've mistaken for solid ground. His new life in Portland is more than just a happy ending. It's a spiritual rebirth. So many betrayal stories are fueled by a quest for revenge, But Graham chose the more difficult, more enlightened path of self-love and reconstruction. He found a community that valued him for who he was, not what he could provide. This quiet, dignified peace feels like a blessing that God had held in reserve, waiting for the moment Graham chose himself. It transforms this from a simple tale of woe into one of the most inspiring grandpa stories of resilience. The strength to set a boundary, to walk away, not in anger but in self-preservation, is a reflection of the inherent worth that God bestows upon every soul, a worth that no one has the right to take away. We are left with a powerful question: when is it an act of profound love to set a boundary, even if it causes pain to those we care about? Share your wisdom and personal reflections in the comments below. Your experiences are what make this community so special. If this story resonated with your spirit, please consider sharing this message of hope with someone who needs it. And to continue exploring the depths of the human heart with us, be sure to subscribe to the channel.